Greetings, parish orphans and retrogrades. Happy Monday, the last day of September. We are headed toward October as fast as can be imagined, considering that it's the last day of September. This means the Synod on Synodality session opens in 2 days. It means our household favorite month of the year opens in 1 day. We love October. Fall is here. It's in the air, even in toasty, humid, southerly Mississippi. And with the close of last week, Thursday, Friday, depending on where you're talking about, Italy or America time, there was an announcement of an apostolic visitation of the fraternity, the Fraternal Society of St. Peter. And it never sounds good. This took place on September the 26th, which was Thursday, Friday. The priestly fraternity of St. Peter has recently been informed by the Dicastery for the Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life of the opening of an apostolic visitation of the fraternity. As prefect of this dicastery himself made clear to the Superior General and his assistants during a meeting in Rome, this visit does not originate in any problems of the fraternity, but is intended to enable the dicastery to know who we are, as if this hasn't happened for 36 years. It's a 36-year-old society, the FSSP, created in 1988. Why do they need to know who they are? Also to know how we are doing and how we live so as to provide us with any help we may need. My friend Patrick Coffin joked, we are from the dicastery and we are here to help. Remember Ronald Reagan's 11 worst words in the English language? We are from the government and we are here to help. That's always the story. You don't want a visit from the network. You don't want a visit from corporate. You don't want a visit from the Vatican if you are a high-functioning, right-wing, Latin Mass-loving, tradition-loving society who has gone the way of the bold yet obedient Catholic for 36 years. Right? Hey, we don't want to fall into schism. Yeah, we don't want to talk about that Vietnam, about Lefebvre, and do you like him, do you not? I know a lot of you guys like him. But FSSP has kept their nose clean. They washed behind their ears. They have made sure that they shouldn't be getting visits from any dicasteries that might have them in trouble. So when this was originally reported, I think on Twitter is where I first saw it, by Diane Montaigne, it's like, this is trouble. It's trouble. That's all it is. Even though they say it's not, that's the number one tell that it is. And we know over the last 3.5 years that because of Traditionis Custodes, where Pope Francis said that he's on his way to ending the Latin Mass, he was taking step 1 to ending Latin Mass worldwide, FSSP and ICK and other Latin Mass Ecclesia Dei societies, they have their days numbered anyway. So you sit there, you read this tweet or this news, and you think, what? What does this mean? Well, as you consider that, consider this. The last ordinary apostolic visit of the fraternity was undertaken in 2014 by the Ecclesia Dei Commission. Also consider this. Francis abolished the Ecclesia Dei Commission not long ago, as the Dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life has been in charge of the FSSP and other former Ecclesia Dei institutes, because they've been abolished, for the past 3 years since Ecclesia Dei was abolished. It is now the competency of this dicastery to look after the FSSP. So people are asking, is FSSP going the way of the dodo? Well, there's no way to know for sure, but here's what we do know. Francis thinks that anybody who was not alive before the Missal of Paul VI in 1970, for whom it's not part of their childhood, the Latin Mass. Anyone who's not alive before the Vatican II Mass, post-Vatican II Mass, who attends it has psychological problems. He's said this multiple times, and it seems to be a deeply held belief. And of course it is. It's a deep held belief of almost all the Jesuits. It's a deeply held belief of all of the liberals in the church. It's a deeply held belief of most South Americans. It's a deeply held belief of the Sankt Gallen Mafia, whom Francis represents. And it was a deeply held belief of the Ronerites at the council. Look, if you're attached to Catholic traditions, then dig, you have psychological problems. So how do we reconcile the fact that the story out there is, well, this isn't necessarily a problem. This is the first oversight committee meeting, apostolic visitation in 10 years. And it's by the appropriate agency now that Ecclesia Dei has been abolished. And they say they're not coming to make trouble. But on the other hand, we know Pope Francis thinks that anybody that attends an FSSP parish has psychological problems, because he said it multiple times. And he's promised with a magisterial document, Amoris Laetitia, that he has already undertaken 1 or 2 steps of abolishing the Latin Mass from the face of the earth, basically. Well, that's what today's episode of Rules for Retrogrades is on. What's the deal? What's the dealio with this claim that the Vatican orders an apostolic visitation of the priestly fraternity of St. Peter, but FSSP is saying, don't worry, we're not stressed. You know, we were told that the visitation does not originate in any problems, but aims to enable the dicastery to oversee them in a post-traditionis custodes way, to know who they really are so as to help them. So, I mean, this all boils down to, do you take Pope Francis at his word? I mean, FSSP, we're not asking do we take them at their word, because they're just telling us what they were told. How does one run this analysis? I said the problematic is thus. Francis thinks that anyone that attends FSSP or ICK-SP has psychological problems. Dig. You'll find psychological problems in any of these people younger than 70 who want to go to a Latin Mass. By definition, the ex-Ecclesia Dei institutes, ICK, FSSP, are all basically by and for people younger than those alive at the council, because of how they were the offshoots of Archbishop Lefebvre's movement. In 1988, they're like, hey, we gotta do the thing we deem to be faithful here. We have to toe at least this line. So since they're new enough to be originating in 1988, we know they're basically by and for younger Catholics, or at least middle-aged Catholics or younger. And similarly, Francis has said that these people have psychological problems and aren't therefore worthy of defense. He's also said in Traditionis Custodes, very last 4 lines, that giving back the power to bishops to block the Latin Mass, which Benedict took away in Summorum Pontificum, is just the first step to more aggressive, ambitious steps against the Latin Mass. That has to mean moving toward central action against the Latin Mass. Many of his deputies at the Synod on Synodality, which we'll talk about in the close of this video, also have expressed they don't like the Latin Mass. How do we run all that analysis and flush and make it all go down the toilet? Hey, they're here to help. They're from the dicastery that's in charge of us. It's not a big deal. Okay, that sounds kind of good. On the other hand, Francis thinks you're not unworthy of defense if you go to an FSSP. You have psychological problems, and he's promised in a magisterial document that the Latin Mass simpliciter is probably going away. Well, I side with the latter. I think this is trouble. It's been trouble since Traditionis Custodes. I never said that the removal of the discipline is some sort of heresy by Francis. He's got plenty of material heresies on his bingo card already. That's what the synod's for. I just said this is hatred, bitter old man's hatred against, the Mass of Gregory the Great. Because Mass goes at least back to Gregory the Great. Most faithful Catholics are pretty much accumulated there. And his wider goal seems, whether or not it's speculative, whether or not the Latin Mass ever goes the way of the dodo, he's trying to algebraically isolate faithful Catholics and then harass them and dispirit them. And we all know most of the faithful Catholics are at the Latin Mass. City to city in Europe and America, particularly America, the faithful Catholics find the Latin Mass. This is what they do. And so he's trying to harass us. That's just what he's trying to do. Now, will he take it so far as to actually get rid of the TLM permanently? I could see Francis being so bold. He has those moments of boldness. But now everyone kind of agrees he's having to... what you guys have to understand about this whole configuration of facts, nearly 12 years old now, his pontificate is closer to 12 years old than 11, is that his backers, his constituency, the ones that canvassed for him, including molester Uncle Ted McCarrick with St. Gallen Mafia, they thought that everything that they wanted achieved by Francis, the St. Gallen agenda, that's very well known about, not speculative, would be achievable within 5 years. They've said this time and time and time again. If you read Achille Silvestrini, one of the cardinals in charge of the St. Gallen Mafia, Gottfried de Niels, the one who told us there was a St. Gallen Mafia, also in the Mafia, Cardinal Walter Casper, architect of the first half of this pontificate, the one that really got Amoris Laetitia done by looking at liberal Eastern Orthodox internal forum usages of communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. He's also St. Gallen Mafia. And like I say, molester Uncle Ted McCarrick himself, good friend of Francis. Francis basically enabled him, put him back in position after Benedict had taken him out of play. He bragged at Villanova after Francis's election that there was an Italian gentleman, you've heard me tell this story before, there's an Italian gentleman who said, I think I have the guy to replace our presumptive candidate. There was a candidate at the 2005 conclave, before the 2005 conclave, which gave us Benedict, in the years up to it, that they figured would be their man. It was the leader of the St. Gallen Mafia, Cardinal Martini, who was an enemy of John Paul II's, who, like John Paul II, eventually got and succumbed to Parkinson's, coincidentally, and who they were hoping could beat Ratzinger in 2005 eventually. They didn't know it would be 2005, around the time JP2's health was declining fast around the new millennium. They assumed it would be Martini until he really got too ill. Silvestrini kind of took over the proceedings, and he knew he wasn't likable enough to be Pope. So they started looking for a no-name that could be the new Martini. Okay? This is all part of the story if you want to understand what's going on. And as Daniels, Cardinal Daniels, and Uncle Ted McCarrick have admitted they came up with this no-name Argentine from Buenos Aires who they thought could accomplish all the goals of the St. Gallen Mafia within 5 years. All he needs is 5 years to change the entire church. They thought that the time was ripe, to borrow the Hegelian term, you know, dialectical materialism. History is progress. History is only progress. It moves in terms of something called the Aufhebung. They're all Hegelians, if you really look. So the time was ripe for the church to finally catch up 1,000 years to the world, meaning become evil like the world, which is what they really want. And I've played several times for you on this channel. I don't have it today. Cardinal McCarrick bragging at Villanova University 6 months after Francis became Pope that he's like, I was part of this. There's an Italian gentleman that told me we need Bergoglio. If we're not doing the Martini, because that went south, over a decade before because he got ill and died. Well, if it's not going to be Martini, who's super well known and is featured on Time magazine as the ante-pope, the pre-pope, pope, well, we need a no-name then. We can't have another well-known liberal. Martini was, for a number of reasons, the only well-known liberal that was likable enough to pull off the job as a well-known liberal. So we need someone that's not associated with liberalism. This guy is Bergoglio.